Now, you really have to work hard to keep up with what's going on with politics these days. Remember, the last couple of years, Labor has been arguing the whole time in defence of its carbon tax that it's not impacting on families. There's plenty of compensation. It's not hurting people in the hip pocket. They've been attacking Tony Abbott because he's been saying that the carbon tax is hurting. They've been saying Tony Abbott's been exaggerating everything. It's not hurting. Well, today, we still have a Labor government, but they're saying they're having to act because the carbon tax is hurting us. They want to ease the pain on our cost of living, on households. So it's pretty hard to keep up. You just switch from one side to the other from week to week. But importantly, as you saw there in the news, Kevin Rudd's line that he's axing the carbon tax is getting some resonance today. It is actually not true, of course. He's not axing the tax. What he's doing is just bringing forward by 1 year the move from a fixed price to the floating price. That's what he's doing. He's not even actually doing that. He's promising to do that. He's promising if you re-elect him, instead of waiting to 2015 to go to a floating carbon tax, it'll happen next year. Now, having said that, it's a good move, both economically and politically. Economically, why does it make sense? Well, instead of having the highest carbon tax in the world, Australian businesses will only be paying the equivalent of what European businesses are paying. So no disadvantage compared to the European economies, and less of a disadvantage, less of a cost burden in relation to our major trading partners like the United States, China, Korea and the like. So economically it makes sense. A lot of people in business will be happy about it. Politically, why does it make sense? Well, obviously this draws a line between Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard. He is launching out, trying to prove that he's a different Prime Minister, running a different Labor government to the Julia Gillard government, and this differential, changing her tax, as he says, axing her tax, gives him that political differentiation. But will it work? Well, here's the key. You have to look at Labor's climate policy history. Now, you remember this, but we'll just go through and remind ourselves of what's gone on over the last 6 years with the Labor Party and climate policy. Let's go back to 2007 when Kevin Rudd was opposition leader.
Climate change is the great moral challenge of our generation.
Well, that's right. Back then, Kevin Rudd, looking to get into government, said climate change was the great moral, economic, social, environmental challenge of our time. He promised to bring in an ETS, but of course he won government largely on the back of that promise. When he got there, he couldn't get his ETS through. He didn't have the resolve to put it to a double dissolution election. He squibbed it. He then put it on the back burner and said he was not going to introduce an emissions trading scheme. He was not going to press ahead with his CPRS. He was going to kick it down the line to have a look at it again in 3 or 4 years' time. It's largely why public support for Kevin Rudd fell off and Julia Gillard was able to knock him off as Prime Minister. And no one will ever forget what Julia Gillard said when she became Prime Minister.
There will be no carbon tax under the government I lead.
And of course, even though Julia Gillard said that, we've been paying the carbon tax now for a year. In fact, it just went up this month. So there you have it. There's Labor's history. Twice they've made very explicit, very key promises on climate policy, and twice they've failed to deliver on those pledges. So what Kevin Rudd is trying to do now is he's promising a third approach on climate policy. He's saying to the voters of Australia, vote me in this time, and this time, third time lucky, we will deliver on what we promise on climate policy. It's a big ask, but of course the decision is up to voters, and we might not have to wait too long to find out.